one thing certain to cause debate is greatest teams of all time. Now, they get into the greatest teams of all time. They do. But, and I take some interesting issue with some of them. However, there's a weird thing I noticed the first time I got this magazine. The number one team of all time, according to this magazine, is the 1976-77 Canadiens. I don't think you're going to get any debate on that one, because they lost less than 10 games. In the entire regular season, they lost 8. I think it was 8 games they lost that year. Yeah, 60 wins, 8 losses, 12 ties. And there's no shootouts, there's no overtime. Those are 60 wins in regulation. Dominant. And then the number 2 team is the 83-84 Oilers. There's a weird, strange thing I noticed with teams 1 and 2. Rick Chartraw played 43 games and had 7 points for the 76-77 Canadiens. And then in 83-84, he played 24 games and had 8 points for the Oilers. So the top 2 teams in the history of the NHL both had Rick Chartraw on them. That is the most bizarre, weird thing I've ever seen in hockey. Because, yeah, there's no other overlap here. None. And then in third spot, they have the 82-83 New York Islanders, which was the first team of the greatest teams of all time not to feature Rick Chartraw. Just strange of all the players. And then, yeah, there's a lot of Montreal Canadiens teams in here. The one controversial pick in here, and this came out in 2013, I believe. I believe it did. The publishing date's underneath my name and everything. I believe this came out in 2013 because they have the 12-13 Chicago Blackhawks as the 15th greatest team of all time. Now, of course, that was the lockout shortened 48-game schedule. But they won the cup, and they only lost 7 games out of 48. Well, no, that's not true. Those 5 that they show as ties, those are overtime losses, so they lost 12. 12 out of 48 games. That's pretty good. I think in terms of where you measure them, it's tough because 48 games, it's so much different than an 82-game schedule. They got the 08-09 Penguins in here. That's 23rd. Actually, the interesting one is at the back of the magazine where they go into each team's greatest team of all time. Because this has been a topic of conversation, and I know Rangers fans, got exposed to the page when the Jimmy Vesey signing went down. And everybody remembers the 1940 curse. Well, it wasn't that simple. All right, let's go. What could have been? The Broadway Blue Shirts appeared ready to launch a dynasty after winning the 1940 Stanley Cup. Then came the Second World War. If Blue Shirts fans were told in spring of 1940 their boys wouldn't win another cup for 54 years, it would have caused a real hoo-ha on Broadway. It does say hoo-ha. The Rangers were killer driller in their early days, winning 3 cups, going to 3 other finals in their first 14 seasons. Brian Hextall won the NHL's goal-scoring title in 1939-40 with 24 goals in 48 games. Phil Watson was second in the league in assists and was a regular shift disturber. 4 Ranger skaters, Hextall, Neil Colville, Art Coulter, and Lynn Patrick, were later elected to the Hall of Fame as players, as was their coach, former star Frank Boucher. Boucher was credited with creating the 4-man box defense, now employed around the world by teams killing penalties, and for being the first coach to pull the goalie when trailing during the dying minutes of a game. So those are major developments by one guy. The man between the pipes for the Blue Shirts was Dave Kerr, who played every minute of every game in 39-40 and led the league with a 1.54 goals against average and 8 shutouts. The Rangers' dominant run that year included a 17-3 run and 10-game winning streak and a 19-1-3 stretch that cemented a second overall finish. They reached the Stanley Cup final to play the Maple Leafs, won Game 5 and 6 in overtime to clinch the series, handing the Leafs a Cup final loss for the third straight year. A dynasty seemed to be in the offing, but the Second World War was raging, and many top players began putting down their sticks for rifles and heading overseas to fight. That was kind of neat, Eddie Fitzsimmons of the Society for International Hockey Research said, because just before all these guys went to war, they all seemed to hit their peak. Within 2 seasons, the Rangers were decimated by enlistment and money problems, making it difficult to compete. By the end of the 42-43 season, the Blue Shirts were the worst team in the NHL, finishing last overall 4 consecutive years and missing the playoffs 11 of the next 13 seasons. And that's what you don't hear about. The Second World War happened to the New York Rangers. That's what happened to them. If not for the war, they win at least another Stanley Cup. So that's a strange one. There's something else I was asked too that was actually in here. Actually, they don't answer that question because they go with the Canada Cup. They asked the greatest team, the international tournament's the best team ever, and they have the 1987 Canada Cup Canada team, and that's just kind of known. The best American team they put is the 96 U.S. team. And that was a very, very good team. Actually, I'll go into the United States one while I've been advertised on an American message board. I might as well be nice. I am generally nice. The best American hockey team of all times didn't need a miracle. No U.S. team has ever achieved more fame than the 1980 Olympic squad that stunned the Soviet Union in the semifinal before completing the miracle on ice by beating Finland for the goal at Lake Placid, New York. That squad's spectacular rise is one of the best stories in sports history. The reason for that, though, is because it was an ultimate underdog tale, a group, as there's so often been described, of ragtag college kids shocking the world. The shock was still there 16 years later when the next big triumph happened for Team USA, but it was more about how good the team was rather than the fact it took on the world and won. The American team that beat Canada in a best-of-3 final in the 96 World Cup is the best collection ever to wear stars and stripes. An impressive Team USA squad rolled through the round robin, toppling Russia in the semifinal, and bounced back from a Game 1 overtime loss in the final to earn consecutive victories over Canada in Montreal to win the tournament previously known as the Canada Cup. It got ugly in 96. I don't mean ugly hockey, I mean the trophy got ugly. I'm still using that ugly trophy. It became America's Cup thanks to a stunning combination of speed and strength contained within a mix of veteran leaders, Chris Chelios, Brian Leetch, and Joel Otto, and an emerging crew of young power forwards, John LeClaire, Bill Guerin, Adam Deadmarsh. I love Deadmarsh. It was so sad that his career was cut short with injuries, and Keith Tkachuk. Its brightest star up front, was scoring machine Brett Hull, who had dual citizenship, Canadian-American, who led point getters at the event with 7 goals and 11 points, was named to the tournament all-star team. And don't forget about goalie Mike Richter. As strong as the U.S. was, beating Canada 3 out of 4 times, including round-robin play, it still needed Richter to play spectacularly before rallying late to win Game 3 by a 5-2 count, the winner coming from the stick of Tony Amonte. Tkachuk, who had a fantastic tournament for the Americans at age 24, scoring 5 goals in 7 games, gives Richter credit for the big win in the decisive game. No question, he won us the game, Tkachuk said. You need that goaltending. I don't think we played as well as we should have, but he made big saves at the right time and kept us in it. And that's the best way to describe Mike Richter's entire career. That quote sums up Richter's career. The final game notwithstanding, the Americans overpowered teams, including Canada, throughout the event. Distraught as Team Canada and Canadian fans were at losing a hockey showdown to their southern neighbors, this was no upset. It was simply a case of one country announcing its presence as the sport's newest superpower. I respect this team as much as any we've ever played in a Canada Cup tournament, said Canadian Mark Messier of the Americans before Game 2 of the final. This American team, with the program they've put together, it's one of the greatest teams to play in an international competition. And demonstrating just how good they were in Canada in front of rabid Canuck fans was particularly sweet for the victorious Americans. I'll never forget walking to the rink for Game 3 with me and Billy Guerin and Doug Waite, just getting abused by fans up there, Tkachuk said. It was so packed outside the rink before the game. And then to come back and win and go outside the rink, it was a ghost town. I think everybody couldn't believe what had just happened. That does happen. It's funny, hockey players are probably the nicest guys of any of the 4 major sports in North America. But man, hockey fans can be pricks. They really can be pricks. That was a tournament that really upset me quite a bit, because I was not happy when the U.S. won that at all. Not in the slightest. I was kind of ticked off. And then they've got a bunch of ads in here too, so I'm just ignoring those. Yeah, but it's an interesting topic, the greatest teams of all time. For the Ducks, because the 07 Cup winners are in the top 25 teams of all time, they talk about the 2003 Disney Cinderella team. For Boston, they go back to 1929. I don't think the 2011 Bruins are in this list. I don't think they are. I'd be very surprised if they were, because as much as I love my Bruins, I would not put them in this category. Well, the Leafs are in here, though. They've got spot number 16, and there's Bruins, but it's 1939 Bruins. Colorado, Montreal. There's Toronto again, the 62-63 Maple Leafs. 91-92 Penguins. Can't argue with that. I wish I could, but I can't. 71-72 Bruins. I can't argue with that either, because that was Phil Esposito, Bobby Orr, Jerry Cheevers. Pretty damn good team when you think about it. It's an incredible thing, too. So 70 games played during the regular season. This is the 51-52 Detroit Red Wings. So you've got your scoring list. So you've got Gordie Howe at the top, okay, with 80 points in 70 games. And you look down at goaltending, and there's Terry Sawchuk. And that's it. Just Terry Sawchuk. 70 games. That's it. He played every minute. Goals against average of 1.9 and shutouts 12. And that's why I can't compare goaltenders of past eras with goaltenders of this era. It's impossible. The guy played every minute of every game. And Glenn Hall did that too for years. Backup? Who needs a backup? It was a completely different game. And then I'm looking at jerseys too. I'm like, man, some of these jerseys are really ones that I want. Oh, and then they show the Avs, so that's one I really don't want. This is a weird one because back in the day, Boston had no logo on their jerseys at all. Just numbers. Numbers front and back. The B is right on the sleeve, and the numbers were on the front and the back. So when a team puts the number on the front and you're ready to yell at them, remember that tradition goes back to the 1930s. Just imagine if a team did that now, took their logo, moved it to the sleeve, and then just had a number on the front. Nothing else written, just the number. I know Dallas had the university look with that a few years ago, which grew on me over time, but I'm glad they got rid of it now. Very glad they got rid of it. When I look at the Leafs right now with the jersey that they're putting together for this season, to me, they're trying to get back to this. This is the Leafs team they're trying to get back to. It's that classic old style look from the 40s and 50s. Because they want to appeal to that team and that ideal. Again, they don't want to be remembered for the 80s style Harold Ballard organization. 94 Rangers, sons of Frickin'. Anyways. Rangers, also known as... Oh, God, there's Glenn Healy right in the second paragraph. Glenn Healy's in every single anything Rangers from that era, and Healy just has to jump into the article. I swear, he sneaks in the middle of the night and finds the article and puts himself in it. All regret draft team. This is interesting. So teams draft players, and then when they get traded away, they regret trading them. So this kind of goes with some of the videos I've done in the past and some of the criticisms I've leveled at certain trades. All regret draft team. Number 10, Miroslav Shaitan. Satan. Sent to Buffalo for Craig Miller and Barry Moore, who combined for 153 games. Shaitan topped 25 goals 9 times. Couldn't skate for shit, but he was a very good goal scorer. Number 9, Kimmo Timonen of LA. What did it cost Nashville to land a D-man who could play in 4 All-Star games? Future considerations. Number 8, Pavel Demitra in Ottawa. Dealt to St. Louis for Krister Olsson, who lasted 56 games. Demitra cracked the league's top 10 in scoring 3 times. And may he rest in peace. Number 7, Olli Jokinen and Roberto Luongo in New York. They were traded for Mark Parrish and Oleg Kavasha. Mike Milbury gave Florida its all-time leaders in goals, points, wins, and shutouts. Because Milbury was a nice guy. It's like, man, that team in Florida needs help. And I'm not in any position to help the team I run, but man, I can help Florida. Kevin Stevens in LA is at number 6. The Penguins got a 4-time 40-goal power forward and key cog on 2 cup teams for Anders Hackinson in 1983. Stevens was a guy, too, that when his foot speed went, it just disappeared. His game went from fantastic to disappeared in like overnight. Number 5, Marcus Naslund in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh bought low on Alex Stoyanov. Naslund finished his career with more first-team All-Star selections, 3, than Stoyanov did goals, 2. Number 4, Cam Neely in Vancouver. Vancouver gave away a Hall of Famer power forward for Barry Peterson, who never hit the 100-point plateau again after topping it twice in Boston. At the time of that trade, it looked like a good deal for both teams. The Canucks needed a scoring center. Barry Peterson was that. The Bruins needed help on the wings. Cam Neely was that. And I don't think anybody realized just how lopsided that deal would become as the years went along, because Peterson's game went downhill, and Neely, we all know what Cam Neely did when he got to Boston. So, again, and I look at some of the trades that happen now, and I say this is a mistake. You're trading the future for now, and the now, and I hear, oh no, you know what you're talking about. This is good. This is good. This guy's going to get back to, and they mentioned seasons from years back, and it's like, don't look at seasons 3 or 4 years ago. Don't even look 2 years ago. You just don't know. Look at right now. What is that guy worth? Number 3, Brett Hull in Calgary. The prize coming back in the Hull deal was Rob Ramage, who helped the Flames to a cup in '89. How many more might they have won with the Golden Brett? I thought they got Rick Walmsley in that deal too. I do. I thought they got Rick Walmsley in that deal. I just happen to have a book here. And Ramage was good for Calgary. Let me go find Brett Hull here. I mean, everybody knew Hull was going to be good, but again, nobody knew just how good. So Calgary traded him. A lot of people don't even realize that Brett Hull started in Calgary. And he wasn't playing badly either. He had 26 goals, 24 assists, 50 points in 52 games with Calgary before the trade. So he was playing very well. He was traded with Steve Bozek for Rob Ramage and Rick Walmsley. Yeah. And Walmsley was a key cog in terms of being a backup goalie. They didn't really have a backup goalie before Walmsley got there. I think Walmsley's in this thing too. No, Walmsley had retired at this point. There's Mike Vernon, who had a 2.26 goals against average in the Stanley Cup final that year. Or in the Stanley Cup playoffs that year. Oh, look, it's Ron Tugnut. Hi, Tugger. Anyways, that's just that threw me because I'm like, wait, it wasn't just Ramage, it was Walmsley too. Number 2, Dominic Hasek in Chicago. The Hawks were set with Belfour, who'd won a Vezina as a rookie in 1991, but the Hasek deal was icky on paper. Buffalo gave up backup Stefan Beauregard and a pick that became Eric Daze. Now, Daze was a very good goal scorer, and his career was shortened by injuries too, much like Deadmarsh. The difference being I wasn't a big Daze fan. I loved Deadmarsh. Deadmarsh was one of my favorite players. Number 1, Ken Dryden, Boston. True story. The Bruins drafted the goalie who would vanquish them countless times over his Hall of Fame career. Montreal acquired Dryden from Boston on draft day in 1964 for 3 players who never ended up reaching the NHL. Isn't that amazing? Awesome. I love being a Bruins fan and seeing all that stuff that happens. Yeah, they drafted him 14th in 1964. Good for us. Isn't that fan-freaking-tastic? Drafted Ken Dryden and gave him away. Here you go, Montreal. You guys haven't won a cup in a week. Take Ken Dryden. Take him. Take him. Yeah, all right. And this is where I'll end the look at the greatest teams of all time bit. Just being a Canucks fan and remembering 94. I don't remember 94. Broadway Bridesmaids. And I honestly think this was the best Canucks team. Between this and 2011, I think 94 was the best team. They had more heart. And just such a strong team. Canucks got hot at right time and rode Bure Linden to epic 94 final before having their hearts broken by Messier's New York Rangers. Being one of the 12 teams in the NHL to have never won the Stanley Cup makes reminiscing about the glory days bittersweet. The 93-94 Vancouver Canucks run to the final was ultimately a footnote in the history books that weaves a tale of a New York Rangers team poised and determined to end a 54-year playoff drought. Led by Captain Trevor Linden, the Canucks started the season with a 7-1 run. By the All-Star break, however, the Canucks had slipped to .500, despite Trevor Linden's team-leading 24 goals. Linden wilted in the second half of the season, managing just 8 goals in his final 39 games. His advanced stats must have been terrible. Fortunately for the Canucks, they entered the playoffs with another offensive gem, Pavel Bure, also known as the Russian Rocket. After an average first half, Bure scored 40 goals in his final 42 games, reaching the 60-goal plateau for a second consecutive season. He contributed a team-leading 16 playoff goals, helping the club reach the final. At the time he scored those 16 goals, that was a record in the playoffs. Naturally, there were other key performers for the 7th-seeded Canucks. Goalie Kirk McLean, viewed by some as a weakness entering the postseason, silenced his critics in the first round against Calgary with what was called simply the save. Oh, I remember that. Oh, Kirk McLean, that was amazing. In Game 7, McLean came up huge in overtime, stoning Robert Reichel with a desperate cross-crease pad stop before Bure's winner in the second extra frame. Yeah, if McLean doesn't save that, then this whole storyline never happens. The Canucks rode the emotion of the Calgary series into 5-game dispatches of the Dallas Stars and Toronto Maple Leafs in the semis and conference final, and because they had 3 games in a row at home in both series. I mentioned that when I talked about the 94 Stanley Cup final. The Canucks were lucky. The 2-3-2 format really helped them. For the second time in franchise history, the Canucks made it to the final. Facing a Rangers team led by Mark Messier and Brian Leetch, the Canucks forced to Game 7, but even a 2-goal performance by Linden wasn't enough to thrust them to Stanley Cup glory, and the Rangers won the game 3-2. What makes this extra special was that Vancouver was such a great opponent, said Messier at the time, offering the most bittersweet of compliments. And then he paid them back by coming to Vancouver 3 years later and completely destroying what was left of that 94 team. I thought that was great of Messier to do that. He just, I mean, if basically scorched earth when Messier got here. That was awesome. But yeah, so that's a look at greatest teams of all time and some of the botches done by teams in history. Anyways, thanks for watching.